Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today we're going to be doing our GenCon top 10 board games to buy at the convention. So I myself am not going to the convention. I don't really like these large conventions that are more focused on buying, but if you are heading to that convention, I have a list of games here that I think sound extremely interesting, and they are a little bit uninformed because I have not actually played them, but at the end of the list, I'll also go through some games that I actually have played and that I can strongly recommend that you pick up while you're here. So these are all for purchase. None of them are demos, but maybe there will be demos too, but you can get all of these games while you're at the convention. Now, that being said, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. With that being said, if you aren't familiar, on the Board Game Geek page, there is a list of all of the games, and you can look at every single game that is going to be available for Gen Con, as well as all of the hot games, everything that is going to be available for demo, for purchase, and what the price of those things are, so you can budget accordingly. So it looks something like this. You can go through and you can see exactly what's available. Lots of different games. It took a while to go through all of these, but I'm going to first start off with my top 10 games that I think look exciting, but I don't really have that actual gameplay experience to recommend them with, because after all, they are going to be available here at Gen Con. And we're going to start off with my number 10, and number 10 goes to an expansion for a game that I do enjoy, but I do not play very often because it's a very strange game, and this is Fog of Love, Love on Lockdown. You play as a couple in a relationship, and in this one, you have a scenario where they're going to be emulating an experience of a couple during lockdown. Now, I think this is a really cool idea for a themed game. I think that this introduces probably great mechanisms and some shared experiences that I think many people will be able to relate to, especially those who maybe were going through a relationship like this, or may have an idea of what sort of struggles and issues may have occurred. So I think this is a really interesting take on this game, and I really like the Fog of Love expansions where they go a little bit further. They had one where you had to play with also trying to, you could appease your in-laws, and I think that this one is going to be a great take on this setting. So a very thematic game, Fog of Love, and I think this expansion will do very well. My next game, number 9, is going to go to Marvel Remix. Now, Marvel Remix is a remake of the game Fantasy Realms. I really like Fantasy Realms, one of my favorite small card games. It's a game all about handcrafting. You're going to be putting these cards together, trying to create combos, and the game flow is so fast, and it's so fun to do these bonkers abilities and try to shoot the moon every time. Now, the reason this is a little bit lower on the list is, yes, it does use those mechanisms, but as the Fantasy Realms brand has branched out, it has not really been received that well with the second copy of the game, the Star Trek Discoveries. This version here looks like it does retain the base point cost of the cards, as well as offer a bunch of different symbols. And it looks like some of the cards, like Hulk Operations here, even has cards that are just symbols that'll trigger other things. And I think that's a really cool thing that we actually haven't seen in the original Fantasy Realms. We didn't ever see a card that just counted as multiple things without some maybe drawback or having some penalty or something attached to it. So I think this is a cool idea. But that being said, after looking at some of these cards, it also looks like potentially most of the cards have effects that work very similarly, with just getting bonuses for the different symbols. And that doesn't seem that exciting to me, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just haven't seen all of the cards here. And hopefully this game does turn out to be one that has a great Marvel theme, but is built upon that backbone of the incredible game of Fantasy Realms. And my number, I think this is 8, is going to go to My Father's Work. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but it is a legacy competitive game, and the production quality is very cool. I'm not going to look at any of the components, though, because there could be potential spoilers, but I have heard from friends around town here that do have a copy of this game that it is very, very good, very cool. This is a little apprehensive for me because I do not find myself enjoying competitive legacy games very much. My last 2 experiences with them have been pretty negative, honestly. There have been some pretty big runaway leader problems, spamming certain things over and over again, and the game just taking too long and being very cyclical. So hopefully My Father's Work does a lot of things to approach that and make sure that isn't the case. And I do think the theme is very fun, being a mad scientist and continuing on the legacy of your family and pushing forward with these mad experience and experiments. So excited for this one, and I hope it's good. My number 7 is going to go to Green Team Wins. This is a very simple party style game, and this one here has you playing as trying to become the majority. If you do win one of the questions, if you are part of the majority, you join the green team. And once you become part of that green team, if you stay on the green team, you are going to gain even more points. So it rewards getting the majority again and again and again. And it does look like a very light party style game. Always in the mood for some of these. I think that they are always a hit when it comes to not smaller, but larger groups of people, and for people of all age ranges. So I hope this is a great one, and let's see what it actually turns up to be. The next one, though, takes a bit of a step back from a big party style game and goes more into the deduction sense. And this is interesting. It is called Turing Machine. This is the same team that brought us Decrypto, which is already awesome because I think that's a very thoughtful party game. And I think that this one looks really cool. It's a deduction style game. I would almost akin it something towards Cryptid, where you're all competitively trying to solve this puzzle that's on a board. However, the thing that I think really makes this one stand out is not only can you play it as a competitive game as it's initially designed, but there are also ways to play the game cooperatively and solo. And I think this is a very strong boon to the game because it allows you to play with people at varying skill levels, let them take the lead on certain questions and certain answers. And I am just thrilled in general with the idea of having this cooperative game that you're going to be able to really level the playing field with. So very excited for Turing Machine. And it also has this really cool system here with all of these cars that you're going to be able to slide into things. And I just think it looks great. So very excited to try this one. Next up is a T-Series game from Board and Dice. This is going to be Terracotta Army. Terracotta Army here has the potential to be a wonderful experience. It is going to be a Euro-centric game, and it looks like it. Honestly, once again, all of these is just totally conjecture. I have not played any of these games, but just looking at the board, it looks very similar to me to something like what's it called? Tekenu. Tekenu. It has this rondel area where you can potentially be moving and claiming bonuses. It has all of these areas on the right here where you're going to be placing things in rows and columns. I assume the army itself. And then you also have various power-ups, multiple forms of currency. And the kicker here is it's designed by Adam Kopinski, who's designed one of my favorite games ever, Nemesis. And so I'm excited to see his take on this Euro-style game. He has also done Lords of Hellas. Wasn't a big fan of that, but maybe this is a evolution of his game design pedigree, and I hope that it's able to be something incredible that I'm able to recommend and able to play again and again. So excited for Terracotta Army, and that brings us to, let me count, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. That was number 5, Terracotta Army. And that brings us to number 4. And this one I think sounds wonderful. And you're going to see that there is some basis as to why these next couple of games are pretty high up. So number 4 is going to exit the game, the Advent Calendar. Now, I love the exit system. I think it's brilliant. I love the way that you are constantly manipulating components. There's a lot of out-of-the-box thinking here. It's my favorite of the escape room line. And this one is an Advent Calendar. So not only are you not sitting down for a long amount of time, but you are getting little bits and pieces of these puzzles throughout the month. And I love that, this trickling of puzzles. I think it'll be a great way to bring family and friends together just for that little bit of moment every time. Once again, no spoilers here, but Advent Calendar paired with the exit, and they have done this system before, so clearly it must be working if they are going to be continuing it. So excited for this one, and they've got 2 different flavors this year, but the Mystery of the Ice Cave is the one that I am excited to play. That brings us to my number 3. This is Cat in the Box, the Deluxe Edition. Cat in the Box looks wonderful. I quickly saw an overview of the game, and the concept is brilliant. The idea is you have all of these cards in your hand that are all black, but you get to decide what of these 4 colors they are going to be. However, and this is something that I think needs to be highlighted, every time that you say that one of your cards is a specific thing, you're going to be marking on this track here that that card has been taken. So if I play and I lead with a card that's a 6 and I say, oh, that's a 6 blue, I'll put a marker on the 6 blue with my player pieces. And that means that no one else can claim that that's a 6 blue because everybody else has the same public deck that they're using, the same idea. So if I said mine's a 6 blue, then that means nobody else can be. And you're going to track that on your own board as well. And if you ever decide based on your hand that you're out of a color, you mark that as well on your own personal board. This is brilliant. I love this idea because you get to look at your hand of just numbers, and not only are you playing to your hand, but you're playing to the decisions the other players are making. And I think that is integral. A lot of trick-taking games will make it so that if you have a bad hand, you have a bad hand, and sometimes you're able to make good moves by sloughing off specific cards. But in here, you can be specifically reactive to the position that your opponents are taking and set yourself up for some very strong positions. I think this is brilliant. I'm very excited to try this one, and I think that mechanism of the tracking who has said what and what numbers are potentially available is brilliant. So very awesome. That is Cat in the Box. And my number 2 goes to a retheme of a very well-renowned game. This is Skymines. So Skymines is a re-implementation of Mombasa, which apparently the only thing that was wrong about it was the theme, which makes a lot of sense, colonialism in Africa. But this one in particular here is a redone version with not only the theme change, but also a rules reworking, as well as a solo mode implemented, which just, yes, this is exactly what I want. And to top it all off, this is from one of my favorite designers. This is Alexander Pfister, and this uses this cool, interesting card bringing back mechanism that looks like a lot of fun. I've seen it in Blackout Hong Kong, but I don't think that game is strong enough to support such a cool mechanism. So hopefully Skymines is the better game that uses this interesting mechanism as well. I love Maracaibo. I love Great Western Trail. Let's hope that Skymines goes up there in that pantheon of incredible Euro games by Pfister. And my last one, my number 1 here, is actually the smallest and the cheapest thing that you can buy while you're at GenCon, and I think it's going to be a no-brainer for anybody there. This is my number 1, the Arc Nova Zoo Map Pack 1. This is so simple to buy. It's about $5, they said, and it's just a couple of more maps for Arc Nova. If you like Arc Nova, this is a instant buy. It's just going to introduce more mechanisms to the game. It's going to allow you to make that setup a little bit more variable, and that's what this game needs, in my opinion, is just more interesting effects and abilities. I find that this game has some great cards when it comes to the sponsors, but I find that the animals themselves and some of the other portions are not that exciting. So the map boards with interesting effects, I think, really elevate the game, and so let's hope that this Zoo Map Pack adds some more interesting things that are going to change up all of the players' experiences. So those are all of the games that I want to talk about in particular that I haven't played, or that I don't know if they're actually good, but now I can start talking about some of the games that I have played. So that's the top 10. It's done and over with, but I'm going to rank these. We're going to start off with some expansions and then go into some standalone games that you can enjoy. And if you have any comments about any of the things that I talk about here, please let me know. We can make sure to feature them live here, or if you're watching after the fact, please put them down in the description. Do you have any ideas of games that you're excited to get? Let me know if you agree with any of my picks. I'd love to hear what you think. So that brings us to our next section here. And this next section is games that I have played and I can strongly recommend them. So this comes with a little bit of background here. The first couple games I'm going to start with are expansions, starting off with Great Western Trail, Rails to the North. Now, this is for the second edition specifically, and I was really sad when I upgraded from the first edition to the second edition because it didn't have the Rails to the North. But since they announced it, it was an easy choice for me to get rid of the first edition and go to the second edition because I love this expansion. It adds this board to the top of your area, and this is going to give you new ways to use your auxiliary actions, which means that auxiliary actions are way more important than trying to just maximize the actions of your specific buildings. It's going to change the abilities that you want to actually chase after, and it's going to have you taking a bit more time because these bonuses from moving along this track are very awesome. In addition, some of the higher level cities, as you can see up here for delivery, are in the track up here. So you actually have to take those auxiliary actions to complete certain objectives and actually have places that you want to deliver to. These black bordered cities are way stronger than the white bordered because they allow you to upgrade your hand size and your movement, which is very integral to the game. So this is my favorite expansion for the Great Western Trail. Beats all those little mini expansions. And I love this track moving mechanism. It also makes twos a bit more versatile. Love it. I think this is a wonderful expansion. And if you haven't already, please make sure to get it if you have the new second edition of Great Western Trail. Next up, we have the expansion for Steelslayer. This is the Reckoners expansion. This is going to introduce a bunch of new, what do you call them? The high epics for the Reckoners. These are going to be giant masterminds that replace Steelheart in the original, and they also work way differently. You have Limelight, which has its own book as well, and that's going to change its abilities, as well as what's her name? She's the water lady. I don't remember her name, but her character is so terrifying because not only is she pretty much invincible, she can pop up in the different areas, so she moves a lot more frequently and also will throw hazards at the different players. Now, to balance this out, you also have these new characters, your new Reckoners, that are all from the books as well. They all have their new abilities and some new combinations of dice, and I really appreciate that. Some characters might have 2 different colored dice they spec with. Sam has 1 of each, so he's very versatile. You have lots of great choices when it comes to having multicolored dice because you're not just stuck into one role. And the last thing that I think is really important is it ups the thematics of the game. It's going to introduce these new epic cards that replace all of the epics from the original game, and these are going to make their abilities more thematic. The character that makes earthquakes happen is going to feel like that. The character that freezes stuff is going to feel like that, and I think it's awesome. So I have played through this a couple of times, and I got to say, this is a great expansion. If you like the Reckoners, this is a no-brainer. The next expansion is actually a it's incredible. I think this is brilliant. And this is a Viticulture World. I am loving this expansion. This is my preferred way to play viticulture now. It has you playing the classic Stonemaier winemaking game and moving from location to location, cooperatively trying to use the spaces as efficiently as possible. Because not only do you have objectives to complete with getting this renowned resource, it's the spending money to get it, but you also are going to have to make sure that every player at the table has a certain amount of points. Otherwise, nobody wins. I love this because you're constantly asking the other players, particularly those that might be struggling, hey, what can I do to help you? Do you need this card? There's a trading mechanism in the game where you can actually work together and trade cards. I love this. I think it is brilliant. It reminds me a lot of the Orleans expansion, the Invasion expansion, but I think it's done way better here. And in particular, the strongest portion of this expansion is the fact that the cards in the original game, some cards were just straight up busted. You felt really good when you played them, but you felt kind of bad at the same time because nobody else had this awesome ability and you were clearly going to run away with it. So it kind of sucked when that happened. But in this game, if you draw a busted card, everybody at the table is like, yes, that's exactly what we needed. Can you pass it to that person? Or you use it right now, and you can be fishing for specific things, and every card can be useful. And I love that about this game. There are so many great ways to play it, and I think it's quite challenging, actually. I've played it a couple of times at the two-player mode, and it took a bit for us to actually get through one of the easier missions. So I'm excited to play more of this, and just the idea that there are various cities with various different rules and new things, new cards that will be added, new events and occurrences. Oh, what a fantastic system. Really like a Viticulture World. Next up is another expansion. This one actually came out last year, but it does say it is available at GenCon, and this is Dune Imperium Rise of Ix. This is absolutely wonderful. If you like Dune Imperium, you need to get this expansion. It is everything that I thought was missing from Dune, and I think my friend Ashley said it very well. She asked me, which space do you suggest going to? And I just looked at her and I said, well, with this new expansion, I think every space is good, and that's pretty awesome because there's actual contention for every spot on the board, but that also means there's no clear choices. Every choice is viable, so it's up to you to set your path, and I love that about this. It adds new technologies, so a new way to use your spice. Normally, you were just using it to deploy troops in one big swath in one of the spots, but in here, you actually have some more customization that is immediate and instant. You have a new shipping track that replaces the old yellow spaces on the board, and then your new cards have very fascinating effects that tie into the new mechanisms as well as old mechanisms, and I think that's perfect. The new characters are interesting. The new battle cards are interesting. This is a amazing expansion. If you like Dune Imperium, you need to get this. If you even like it but thought it was missing something, this is what it was missing. This expansion bumped it from a 9 to a 10 for me, and I do strongly recommend it. Incredible expansion. Next up, a very awesome solo game from last year. This is going to be Final Girl. Final Girl is going to be at the Van Ryder's booth, and they do have that initial core box as well as a lot of the different VHS boxes. They're the scenarios that you can play. And I do recommend this one for solo play. That's the only thing it does play. It's going to have you take the role of the final girl trying to defeat these terrible creatures. So you have, for example, Freddy Krueger here, who's going to be able to enter your dreams. And in order to actually fight him, you need to go into his sleep mode. I love this concept. It's wonderful. This game is very thematic, so that is something to be aware of. There are a lot of random things that can happen, though, and I do think that ties in well with the theme, though. You may draw an event card that does something drastically helpful or drastically hurtful, and it's up to you to not mitigate these disasters, but work with these disasters. And I think that's a really cool approach to take on a game like this. You can set it up any way you like. You can mix and match the different characters here. And what a blast. I really like Final Girl. Next up, we have one of my favorites from this year so far. This is a party game that I think is super interesting, but also very fun to play and gives you aha moments as you play. This is Phantom Inc. Phantom Inc. it's actually just gone up in my opinion the more that I've played it. This is a game where you are going to be trying to describe a clue to your team. And I think this does play best at 4, but your teammates here are going to have these question cards that they can give you. They'll give you 2, and it's up to the ghost, the clue giver, to choose one of these question cards to answer. And so it's kind of neat to choose a question that's actually going to be helpful, but sometimes they give you two that are very helpful, so it can be very stressful when you do this. And then you start writing your answers to these questions one letter at a time. But then it's up to the person who asked the question to decide when to stop. This is so interesting because you can, based on the question that you've asked, you can prematurely stop the word, but that means that the other team doesn't know what the question was that you asked, so they have to try to deduce what the word could possibly be. And then this leads to this crazy aha moment where you look at all the words and everything just fills in. You understand why they were answering these things to your questions. A certain word may tip you off, and it's even cooler when it's an opponent's word. Oh my goodness, it is so neat. I think this game is just a phenomenon in a box, and I really enjoy it. So this is one that you need to check out if you enjoy a party-style word game, and particularly if you have 4 or more players. I think this works extremely well. And the last game that I want to talk about here just arrived on the doorstep about 3 weeks ago, and I'm loving it. This game is incredible. This is Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. This takes a lot of things that I love from all sorts of games and puts them in a package that is streamlined, clean, and extremely varied and interesting. It does a lot that I enjoy from these newer games where it encourages you to use items. It encourages cooperation. It makes it so that playing it is approachable and accessible through the use of these companion cards to make it so it's not super overwhelming to control multiple characters, but it does allow you to mix and match different characters in very interesting and unique ways. This is a boss battling game where you play as Oathsworn. You'll be going into cities, and kind of like a Witcher, you have monsters that you'll need to destroy. You've made an oath to protect everybody from these evil creatures that live in this nightmarish forest that is outside of the setting that you live in. This is such a cool boss battling system. You're going to have these characters that have their own sets of cards that are very reminiscent to something like Gloomhaven. However, they actually use an action point system that is more reminiscent to something like Batman Gotham City Chronicles. You're going to be using cubes to activate different cards, and after you play a card, it'll go into this cooldown track. And based on where you play them, it's going to push other cards along the way. But the kicker here has to do with not only there's just so many good things to talk about in this game. I can't even say kicker because all of it is amazing. So one thing I really love is the battle dice. Every time you attack, you decide if you want to roll dice or if you want to use cards from an attack modifier deck. Once you use cards from an attack modifier deck, though, you know they're in the discard pile, so they can't possibly be in the deck, and there's a set ratio. So maybe you've hit a lot of your hits in the red dice, and you decide instead of using the modifier deck, because you know there's a lot of blanks left, you decide to go and chance it and just roll the red dice. Super risky, but it might be better odds than actually playing with the cards in the deck. There's also cards that allow you to reshuffle the decks, but nothing else, which is super interesting because you're resetting your odds on those different things. And the kicker here on this mechanism itself is you can mix and match those two. So you can roll some of a certain color and use a modifier from another. The other thing I really like about this game is the story. It's super easy to play. There's excellent narration from the character from Game of Thrones who plays Jorah Mormont. I think that's really awesome. So you can hear his voice and narration throughout. And then you also have this very simple time track story system and different paths that you can take. So even if you do on the replay, you can switch it up. And the last thing that you can do here, or the last thing that I want to talk about that is amazing, are the bosses. The bosses are very different. The bosses have these different hit location areas where you can attack a specific part of their body in order to make certain effects weaker. And the top card of that character's deck is always available to see. So you can plan on what is happening. However, once you do hurt these characters, you do anger them, and they immediately will attack if you ever do defeat one of those hit locations completely. But that being said, you are able to anticipate that attack when you do end up breaking it. There's a lot to love here, and just playing through a couple of these bosses already, they're so different. And it's so interesting how some abilities become useful and some do become totally worthless, or some just change in their efficiency. And it's super fascinating. One last thing I want to talk about are the items in this game. I love how when you attack something or after an encounter is finished, you always have to get rid of an item. And this means that you're constantly thinking about what you're bringing in and thinking about what you're destroying and leveling up your character and using new things. And the game encourages you to do so. But you're always getting new stuff whenever you defeat a creature. So I think this is a great system of basically getting to use all of the stuff in the game without anything ever feeling stale or feeling forced. I feels pretty natural the way that you're constantly changing your gear. And to top it off, the armory box here actually has miniatures that will reflect this. I'm not going to show anything else besides this first picture here because I do not want to give any spoilers for this game. But if you are interested in Oathsworn Into the Deepwood, the company has announced that there will be copies that are not there at GenCon. So you can't actually buy the game while you're at GenCon, but you can buy it for like a pre-launch. So they have some in a warehouse, and if you buy it from them, because the game is gigantic, I imagine, but if you buy it there from them, then they will send it to you with the wave that is waiting for it right now, if that makes sense. So there will be a way to get Oathsworn, and it is first come, first serve for those copies. So this might be one that you do chase after first. But that's it. Those are all of the games that I wanted to talk about in particular for Gen Con 2022. Those are the games that I would recommend either looking at for those ones that I don't really actually know anything about. I have not played them, but then the strong recommendations there at the end for games that I have played and I can strongly recommend, and I think that you'll love if you enjoy that style or those brief descriptions that I've explained about them. So as mentioned before, if you have any comments or any questions about any of the games that I talked about here, please let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. I'll leave the stream up for a little bit longer in case anybody does have any questions or any other games that I should take a look at for Gen Con. But I hope that anybody who is going to have a wonderful time and enjoy their time gaming and trying out all these new games. So let me know how these games that I am excited for turn out to be. Let me know if they're actually worth the purchase. And I'm thrilled just to see what comes out of Gen Con and see if we get any other cool new releases or anything like that. So I'll leave it up for a little bit more. I'll get some water. Okay. And then things coming up for SideGame. We have our FrankCon 2022 report. I'm putting that out on Friday, I believe. The video is edited and ready to go, so excited for that one. Just a quick little report on all of the games that were played at FrankCon, as well as some of our awards from the convention. It was awesome. We had our community day and everything, and it worked really well. Lots of fun games played. I was quite pleased with FrankCon this year, so I think that I would like to see it continue to grow and hopefully someday become something even bigger, lasting multiple days. So lots of great stuff happening there. And looks like we had a little bit of time there for any comments. So as mentioned before, if you are watching this in the future, let me know down in the comments below what you think. But I'll go ahead and wrap up the stream now. Thank you again so much for your time and for watching, for listening to my thoughts, and have an amazing time with your convention season. Sidegame Strong.